Welcome to Cultivating Equality, Stories of Women and Men, an audio learning program funded by Fives. Cultivating Equality was developed to raise awareness and promote understanding of gender equality in the company's operation, including both staff and suppliers. Each chapter will be an opportunity to learn about gender equality and business. As we move along, you will discover the opportunities that arise when we cultivate equality. Prepare to learn and grow together in our audio learning program. Welcome to this essential chapter on nutrition, because what we eat fuels everything we do. Before we dive in, let's take a moment to reflect on our own meals. Think back. What did you have for dinner last night? What did you eat for breakfast this morning? And what's on the menu for lunch today? These simple questions can reveal a lot about our eating habits. Are we getting the right nutrients to keep us healthy, strong, energized, and thriving? To guide us through the best ways to nourish ourselves and our children, we have a very special guest today. Joining us is public health nutritionist Cathleen Juan, school feeding coordinator for the Ministry of Education, Science, and Technology in Belize. Kathleen, we're thrilled to have you with us.
Thank you, Carolina. I'm glad to be here on this program because what we eat is very important for our health and the health of our families. It's what allows us to develop, to work, and build our dreams.
So let's start with the basics. When we talk about adult nutrition, what exactly do we mean?
When we think about what kind of foods we eat, an easy way to help us keep track of what we're eating is by dividing foods into different groups. So, for example, we would look at fruits, bananas, oranges, watermelons, melons, those kind of things you're very familiar with would be one group. And then we have vegetables, which would be our tomatoes, spinach, um, sweet peppers, cabbage. Then we have the protein group. Proteins include both foods from animals, so for example, meat like chicken, pork, fish, eggs, but they also include some plant foods as well, particularly beans and lentils, and then also considering, for example, milk and yogurt as other products that would have protein in them. Then we have our carbohydrates, also known as starchy staples. These are the things that kind of make up the base of all of our foods. They're usually present in every meal we eat. So it's going to be something like rice or corn or flour tortillas, pasta, and then your roots.
When we talk about roots, what are we referring to? Can you give us some examples?
Like your cassava, potatoes, macal, as well as any kind of cereal.
So, when we talk about this group of carbohydrates, does that include cereals like rice, corn, or wheat?
So, breakfast cereal, like what you eat from a box, but also things like oatmeal, and then other grains like that.
So far, Kathleen, you've walked us through the four main food groups: fruits, vegetables, proteins, and carbohydrates. But what about fats? Are they bad for us, or do they also play an important role in our diet?
Fats, people might think, oh, we don't want to eat fat. Well, actually, your body does need fat. So when we look at including fats in the diet, we want to look for healthier fats. So we want to look for, if we're cooking with oils, that they don't have any trans fats in them because trans fats are not healthy. And then we want to look for healthier versions of fats that we do use when we're cooking. So, for example, using olive oil, using coconut milk, avocado, those are all natural and healthier fats that we add.
Why is it so important to eat from all the different food groups? What does each one give us?
Because all of these different foods are going to give us different types of energies and different types of nutrients in our diets. So, having a mix of these groups of foods throughout the day is one of the best ways that you can ensure that your diet is healthy.
Let's talk about portions. How much should we actually be eating? I'm starting to wonder if I might be going a bit overboard with the carbohydrates myself.
The tendency we see is for people to eat a large amount of the carbohydrates, so the rice, pasta, and then there might be a little sprinkling of some salad on the side, and then you've got a portion of your usually chicken, your meat, and you got some beans. Okay, so the proper portion size for an adult of if you're eating, for example, lunch and you have rice with your lunch, it should be about 1 cup of rice, which is about your hand in a fist. So if you just want to kind of estimate from the size of your hand, if you put your hand in a fist, that's about 1 cup. That's how much rice you should be getting. And then basically half of your plate should be fruit and vegetables. And we don't hardly ever see people eating that way.
And children, how do portion sizes apply to them, especially as they grow?
With children, depending on their age, the smaller children, it's going to be maybe a half cup or less of the carbohydrate serving per meal. And then children who are older, it will be the same as adults. It's about 1 cup serving.
What are some healthier and more balanced options, Kathleen, that we can offer our children instead of filling them up with rice, bread, or pasta?
Can we add in some seasonal fruit and vegetables that are inexpensive? How about some eggs? Eggs are very, very nutritionally complete for children, especially, and tend to be less expensive, especially if you have chickens in your own yard. Beans as well.
I noticed that the food groups does not include sugars, desserts, soft drinks, or sodas. And I have often seen that both adults and children have bread with soda or soft drinks for breakfast.
Exactly. And this is something we are seeing a lot. When we look at, we ask children, what are you eating during a day? And we'll find, for example, almost 100% of children will say that they will have a soft drink or a soda at some point during the day. This is completely not necessary for their health, but it is harming them in some way. So they do not need the sugar and chemicals in these drinks. It's something that if you want an occasional treat once a week or so, if you want an occasional drink, that's fine. But the daily use or the seeing it where your children are having these for breakfast, what it's doing is it's adding these calories to the diet, and then it's adding in a lot of chemicals and sugars that they don't need. And so what we are seeing, even in children, is a lot more obesity, gaining weight, very more than what they should be for their age and their height and their gender. And this then puts children at risk for a lot of diseases, especially as they get older, and especially things like diabetes or high blood sugar. Very concerning with the high consumption of these sugary drinks. And then, of course, you see things that you would associate with a lot of consumption of sugar, such as teeth decay. And so, you will see uh, here where I live, children sometimes even are given these sugary drinks in their bottles as very young children. And then before they even get to school, all of their teeth have rotted in the front of their mouth because of this high consumption of sugar. So these are concerning, and it is something that parents need to be aware of for their children, but they also need to be aware of for themselves and their own daily consumption. Like, you should not be drinking a soda with your meal, with every meal. That is not okay, and it's going to harm you. And people need to be aware of this and start thinking, okay, why am I doing this? Am I drinking this because it's cheap and it's an easy option? All right, so how can I change my environment to make water easier to get and also something that I want to drink? Do I need to make it cold? Do I need to make sure I have a bigger jug of water with me during work at day? How can I make it easier for me to make the healthier choice with my diet?
And going back to the subject of early nutrition, how should the mother and the baby be fed?
Okay, so actually, we want to think about even before delivery how the mom should be fed, and even before she gets pregnant, because one of the things that's very, very important is that the mother's body already have the nutrients it's needed. When the baby is developing in the first couple of weeks, even before the mother might know she's pregnant, there is critical need for some nutrients like folic acid. And if the mother's body doesn't already have a store of folic acid, the baby might have problems developing. It's the same thing with iron, which is another nutrient that the mother needs during her pregnancy to help the baby develop properly. For example, if the mother doesn't have enough iron in her body, the baby can be born and already lacking in that nutrient in their own body, which causes a lot of problems.
For women, especially those who are already pregnant or may become pregnant, how can they get enough folic acid and iron in their diet?
By eating a diverse diet. So you're making sure you're getting your proteins and your fruits and vegetables every day. And in particular, for the iron and the folic acid, you're going to be looking at proteins that are from meats. So, red meat is very good. If you can't get a lot of meat, then you're going to look at things like beans, which have a lot of protein, eggs or milk. If you're getting your protein from vegetable sources like the beans, a little tip is that you can have a glass of lime juice or have some sort of some citrus with it, and that helps your body absorb the iron better when you're eating that. Again, the mom should always be checking in with her nurse or whoever's following her if she needs to take vitamins during that time to make sure she has enough iron in her body. That's something important to do, and afterwards as well. And then after she has the baby, the mom should be eating a normal diet. And we do see some things where, oh, don't give the mom beans after she delivers the baby because, it causes tummy problems. Actually, we want moms to eat beans because it has a lot of nutrients in it. So it shouldn't be a diet that is taking anything away. It should be a diet that's adding in more nutrients for the mom.
What's the best way to make sure babies get all the nutrients they need during their first 6 months of life?
Breastfeeding exclusively. That means the only thing that the baby eats or drinks is breast milk, and breast milk will provide all of the nutrients the baby needs for the first 6 months of their lives. And so the mom also needs to be supported as well. When a baby starts eating foods, about 6 months is when you start to introduce solid foods to babies. The best thing is for the baby to be eating the same types of foods that the family is eating at home. You just make it appropriate for their age. So you're grinding things up, making sure it's, liquidy or moisture. So when they are between 6 and 23 months old, when they're eating those foods, their body needs so much nutrients because of how much growing and developing they're doing. So how can we make sure the baby is getting the proper amount of nutrients? When you give them a meal, you kind of mix different things together. So you don't just give them one thing. You don't just give them sweet potato. If they're getting sweet potato, add in a little bit of avocado, a little bit of egg, a little bit of yogurt. Mash it all together, and you see how we went from these different food groups, and then you give that to the baby as a mash. So okay, when I'm feeding my baby this little mash where everything's mixed together, they're getting a whole bunch of nutrients in this meal.
And what's something that children don't need in their diet?
Under the age of 4, the baby or little child under the age of 4, they don't need any sugary drinks at all. So up until age of 1, breast milk. At age of 1, they can get um, milk from animals added in. And then after that, up until the age of 4, no sugary drinks, not even fruit juice, natural fruit juice. You don't need to give those to children. They can be on milk and water up until the age of 4 years old.
Kathleen, it would be interesting to go a bit deeper on why those foods should not be eaten by children.
So when we are thinking about a child eating in the first couple of years of life. It's not just the nutrients, which of course are super, super, super important, but you're also kind of teaching the child what to eat. And what they start to eat when they're very young tends to be what they eat for the rest of their lives. That's why we want to make sure we're introducing a lot of different kinds of food into the child's diet when they're very young. And they aren't going to like everything. So you give them some avocado and they spit it out. That's okay. Give it to them again. Try it again because that's a healthy food for them. The more they try it, the more they're exposed to it in their diet when they are young, the more likely they're going to accept it and then continue eating these healthier foods as they get older. That's why it's so important to be not only giving babies a lot of these different types of healthy foods, but not giving babies and young children the unhealthy processed foods.
In recent years, we've been hearing more and more about ultra processed foods and even seeing warning labels on foods at the supermarket. What exactly does ultra processed mean? And why should we be paying attention to it?
These are foods that you will typically see in a package on the shelf in your store, and it kind of gives you a clue that they're ultra processed because they can sit there on the store in their package for a long time and they will never go bad. And another clue is that when you look at the ingredients on these packages, you can't make this in your own kitchen. It has so many different chemicals and ingredients in it that there's no way you could cook this in your kitchen. That's what we call an ultra processed food. Um, Chips, biscuits, sweets, ramen, um, sausages that are just packed full of chemicals. All these things are examples of ultra processed foods. And over the years, these have become more and more part of everybody's diet to the point where sometimes it's the main part of people's diets. And this is very concerning for a couple of different reasons. First of all, these in lots of different research studies, these types of foods have been linked to a lot of different long-term diseases, cancers, diabetes, heart disease. Basically, you name a disease and they're finding a link to this high consumption of these types of food products. Second, when you have a lot of these foods in your diets, what they do is they become a substitute for healthier foods. So if you fill up on a bag of chips, you might not have that side of vegetables with your lunch. And the chips are going to have a lot of energy, which we know as calories in them, but they're not going to have a lot of nutrients. And so what we are seeing is there's this trend where people are gaining weight because they're taking in a lot of calories, which is energy, but at the same time, they are malnourished. They do not have the nutrients that their body needs to grow and develop and work properly. So it's a very big concern, and it is something we are highlighting a lot. It's not just to eat a diverse diet from these food groups, but it's also you have to be very aware of these ultra processed foods and try and eliminate them from your diet as much as possible.
And how do we know that we're feeding babies, children, and adults in a balanced way?
When you are looking at what you're eating during the day, so you are looking to see, I'm getting a range of the different types of food groups I'm feeding mixed together for my children at different types of food group. And then to make sure to monitor that, your doctor or nurse or you can monitor at home, you're looking at your baby's and child's growth. So the height and the weight. And many years ago, they did a study all around the world. They included thousands of children from all around the world. And what they did is they looked at the average heights and weights for these children at different um, time periods in their growth. So, 6 months old, what would be the average height and weight for a little girl when she's 6 months old? For 23 months old, they have a whole chart. And when you go take your child to the nurse, they will measure the baby or the child's height and weight, and then they will compare it to these world averages. And so that's how you can know, okay, my child is growing pretty much like normal, or, oh, my child is gaining too much weight. We need to be paying attention to the sugary sweets and the chips that we're giving and take some of that out of the diet. Or, oh, my child's height is not matching where they should be at this age. Um, do they need to be having more nutrients in their diets? Have we not been giving them more nutrients? So that's very, very useful and should be done. And that's why it's really good to get your child checked. As they're babies, they get checked every couple of months. And then as they are getting a little bit older, at least once a year to go into the doctor or the nurse and get their height and weight checked to make sure that they are growing the way they are.
And what diseases can occur if we do not eat well?
A lot of diseases are related to eating. So, we did talk a little bit about malnutrition. For example, we see stunting, which is where you have a low weight, or I'm sorry, you have a low height for your age. You did not grow as tall as you could have because your body didn't get the proper nutrients it needed as a child. And people will think, well, what's the big deal? I didn't grow as tall as I could have. Well, actually, studies do show that it puts you at higher risk for these non communicable diseases. So you are at higher risk for obesity, for the high blood pressure, and also you just are overall less productive. Like you can't do as much work. Your body just isn't as didn't develop as properly as it should have. And one of the more concerning things about stunting is it tends to be passed to the next generation. So, a stunted mother often will have children who are stunted. Now, there is a lot of things that can contribute to that. But I think the two primary things we look at is, first of all, the mother's body did not have the nutrients that it needed to grow the baby during pregnancy. And then second, the mother didn't have the habits of healthy eating for herself. And so then when she was feeding the baby, as the baby started to eat solids and so on, again, the baby wasn't getting the nutrients it needed. So this tends to be a cycle, and it is something that needs to be broken in this region because the incidence of stunting is quite high in this area, and it can be fixed through diet. This is directly related to diet. By a more nutrient dense diet can actually stop stunting from occurring, or it can actually reverse stunting. If you catch it before the child is like 4 years old, you can actually reverse that, and the child will then grow normally once they start getting the nutrients that they need.
And in adults?
High blood pressure and diabetes are directly related to diet, diabetes especially. Um, Cancers are more directly linked to certain types of foods, but then foods that are full of preservatives, for example, the types of meats that are cured. So your bacon, your sausages, high consumption of those puts you at risk for certain types of cancers, especially cancers of your digestive system, such as cancers in your stomach and your intestines.
When we look at the personnel working on Five's farms, about 20% have hypertension, and most of them are women between the age of 29 and 50. In Five's operations, we find that women tend to be more sedentary than men. Female workers are just as capable of being active as men, but exhaustion and unpaid care work after a long day of work keeps them sedentary. Instead of unwinding with a walk or exercising with an online video, female workers dive into household chores like cooking, cleaning, or even helping their children with homework, leaving little time or energy for physical activity. While men also feel tired after long days' work, traditionally they do not have any unpaid care work once they reach home. Hence, men can do their physical activities or play sports such as soccer. So, is hypertension only a women's issue?
No, of course not. Um, Hypertension is also very common in men, and men also will suffer the consequences of having high blood pressure, which is, eventually down the line could lead to the heart failure or the strokes as well. So men also need to be very aware of this type of non-communicable, these long-term diseases that they might not even recognize that they have. Getting your blood pressure taken, and if you are prescribed medication, you have to take that medication every day.
And can hypertension be reversed?
In some cases, if you are very, very disciplined and follow a diet which has very low in carbohydrates and sodium, which is salt, then you can bring your blood pressure down and increasing your exercise. However, most people don't get to that point where they're able to follow the diet and increase their exercise and so on. And so for them, it is very, very, very important that they take their medication to control the high blood pressure, and that they take their medication every day. They don't skip it.
Kathleen, can you please explain what is diabetes?
Diabetes is a disease where your body stops being able to use sugars. So that means when you eat sugar in your diet, and it can be something like a candy or a sugary drink, a soda, but it also just might be sugar from the foods you eat, because every food has some sort of sugar in it, right? So it might be fruits, or it might be your bread, pasta, rice, those kind of things has sugar in it. Your body loses the ability to break that sugar down and use it properly. And so it starts to build up in your blood. And that's why they call it high blood sugar, because your blood actually has high levels of sugar into it. And this is very damaging for your body. Diabetes is a huge disease in Central America and the Caribbean, which means that likely you know someone who has high blood sugar, or your family member has high blood sugar. And so you have seen firsthand what this damage can do to your body. So some of the things that can happen with diabetes that is not controlled through medication or through insulin is that people end up getting their fingers, toes, even sometimes legs amputated, that their kidneys stop working and they have to go on dialysis. One of the biggest risk factors for diabetes is being overweight and obese. You can actually significantly decrease your risk for diabetes, and sometimes even completely correct your blood sugar by losing weight. The reason we are seeing so much more diabetes in these countries is because a lot more people are now overweight. And this actually is something we are seeing more in women, especially younger women in their 20s to 50s and up. You're seeing that women are gaining weight rapidly once they lose their teenage years, where they've been a little bit more active and their metabolism was a little bit faster. They go into their 20s, they start having children, and all of a sudden they start gaining and keeping a lot of weight. And that obesity is definitely puts you at very high risk for having diabetes. So that is something that people do need to be aware of. And again, similar to stunting, what we're seeing is that maybe everybody around you is overweight. And so you don't necessarily think it's a problem because it's what you see in everybody in your community. But this is harming your body, and it is putting you at risk.
How can we check for diabetes?
So this is a simple test that can be done by a nurse or at a clinic to check your blood sugar level. And if they find that you have high blood sugar, like I mentioned, you can actually reverse diabetes through weight loss and diet. But if you aren't able to do that, there are medications that, again, will help with your blood sugar, and they have to be taken every day. And you still need to be making sure to cut out the extra sugars from your diet that are harming your body. So, again, like with the high blood pressure, Diabetes is actually a little bit more, you do have a chance of reversing it with weight loss, unlike with high blood pressure, which tends to be a little bit more difficult to reverse. So this is something that you can do.
You included water as one of the key components of proper nutrition. Can you explain how we can know if we're drinking quality water?
The drinking the quality water, that is actually something that is important to think about, because a lot of different diseases and sicknesses can be spread through water. So you do have to pay attention to where your drinking water is coming from. Um, Making sure that, for example, you're not taking water directly from a stream or a pond that, and you don't know, is a toilet being emptied into this water source? Is a farmer down the stream, up the stream, putting chemicals in? So, if you don't have, for example, a safe well that's been tested where you live, that you know the water coming from it is safe to drink, then you need to think about, should I be getting water in 5 gallon bottles because I know that it's tested and safe for me to drink? Or if you can't be sure and you can't get water that's from a tested safe source, then you do need to be boiling your water, your drinking water. Say, for example, your water comes from, you collect your water from your roof and you have it stored rainwater, and that's what you're using for drinking water. That water should be boiled and cooled before you're drinking it, just to make sure that there's no parasites or bacteria in it that's been, when it rains, it comes off your roof and it goes right into your tank. And then you don't want to be ingesting that and getting sick as well.
For those working long hours in the fields, what can they do to stay aware of how heat is affecting their bodies and make sure they're drinking enough water throughout the day?
If they're out in the field and they are out in the hot sun all day long, that does put them at risk for their body temperatures are higher if they're not drinking enough water and paying attention to how they feel if their body temperature is getting too high, if they're getting dehydrated. So they need to be very aware of taking care of themselves. One thing I always tell people to do, and it's very easy, is if you have a water bottle, for example, that has 1 liter of water, put 4 rubber bands on the bottom of the water bottle. And during the day, every time you drink the whole water bottle all the way down, move the rubber band up to the top of the water bottle. So you can easily keep track of how many liters of water you've had during the day. If you are not doing anything, if you're just sitting around your house, you want to have at least 2 to 3 liters of water a day. If you're out in the field, you're looking more towards 3 to 4 liters of water a day. And you can easily lose track of that if you're working and doing your job and everything. So the rubber bands on a water bottle is one way that you can try and keep track of that in an easier way.
And since coffee plays a major role across many countries where Fives operates, what are the keys for healthy consumption?
Coffee is really interesting, because, people do get concerned and people will drink a lot of coffee. Coffee is a plant, right? It does have nutrients in it, and you do get some beneficial, different types of chemicals in a coffee that could actually be protective for health. But what you need to be aware of is how much sugar you're adding to your coffee when you're drinking your coffee. You don't want to be dumping a bunch of sugar in your coffee. It then becomes a sugary drink and it is not healthy for you. And a lot of times, for example, if we see children drinking coffee, first of all, children don't need the caffeination that's found in coffee, right? So they don't really need to be drinking coffee. If they are drinking a little bit of coffee for breakfast or so on, the milk in the coffee is actually good for them to be getting milk that way, but we don't want to be adding the sugar in. If you're an adult and you're drinking like 1 or 2 cups of coffee a day, you're probably good as long as you're not putting a lot of sugar in it. If you start to get up 3, 4 cups of coffee a day, then you really need to be thinking, okay, is this healthy for me having all this caffeine? And why? Why do I need to be drinking this much coffee? Am I using it to keep me awake? If I am, what in my life is causing me to need to have this extra stimulant, and is there anything possibly that I could do to make sure that I get more exercise or more sleep or so on, because nutrition isn't just about, like I said, what you eat, but it's about your whole body, right? So you do need to be thinking about your exercise, you need to be thinking about your sleep. Your body cannot heal itself and cannot absorb nutrients properly if you're not getting the right amount of sleep and just taking care of your body as a whole.
It is not usual to talk about alcohol when we talk about nutrition, but taking advantage of your expertise, I would like to ask you, could you please explain how it affects our health?
So alcohol consumption, interestingly, some types of alcohol, for example, beer, actually can cause nutrient deficiencies. So there is a type of anemia, which anemia is when your blood doesn't carry enough oxygen and you get really tired and stuff. That is caused by drinking too much beer because it actually stops your body and takes stops your body from absorbing the nutrients it needs, and it actually takes the place of something else. So, like for example, if you're drinking a lot of beer, filling up on that, then you aren't eating the food maybe that would give you the nutrients that your body needs. And so, with alcohol consumption, always the caution is that you're drinking too much alcohol. And just like with anything else, too much is going to be harmful to your body, just like drinking too much sugar sweetened beverages, right? And so this is where you say, okay, once a week or so on, not a problem, making sure that you're eating and drinking well the other days of the week. But when you start to just drink a lot, you are actually putting your body at risk for a nutrient deficiency because it's taking away your body's ability to absorb the nutrients, and it's taking place of something that might have given you nutrients as well.
Thank you, Kathleen, for highlighting how proper nutrition fuels our bodies, helping us prevent diseases and live a healthier, more fulfilling life at work and at home. Before we wrap up, could you share the key takeaways from our conversation so our listeners can walk away with the most important insights?
So let's see. When we talk about diet, we need to talk about diversity in our diet. Diversity means we're eating from a lot of different types of food. We're eating from all of the food groups. We also need to be very aware of those unhealthy processed food items that are becoming more and more common and trying to take them out of our lives. How do we do that? We change our environment. Okay, so at our home, we make the decision when we go grocery shopping that instead of buying a bag of chips, we are going to buy some nuts, some almonds or some cashew or some peanuts. And then at home, when you are hungry and you want a salty snack, what do you have in your house? You have nuts. And so that's what you eat. And guess what? That's the healthier choice. You make it harder for yourself to eat unhealthy because if you really wanted chips, you'd have to go out of your house and go to the store versus, well, I'll just have these nuts because they're here. Buy some bananas and have the bananas on your countertop. When you want a sweet treat, well, the bananas are right there. They're easy to grab. And this is especially true for children who, as any of us who have children know, eat all the time. So what do you want to have? You want to have something very easy for them to get, have it where they can just grab it and you don't have to try and come up with anything for them, but make sure it's a healthy option. And then of course, when we talk, as we did before, it's important to consider your whole body. So you're also considering your exercise as well, which is very important. 30 minutes a day is really all that's recommended that you do something for 30 minutes every day for adults that is bringing your heart rate up a little bit. You feel that your heart's beating a little bit faster. That's how you know you've been exercising. For children, the recommendation is 50 minutes a day. Get those children outside, get them out playing football or running and playing tag, riding a bike. Every single day, make sure your children are outside having some sort of activity. As far as the hygiene, so this is a topic we could spend a lot of time on. There's a lot of components to food safety. You have to not only think about how you are preparing your food, but if you're eating food from somewhere else, how the people somewhere else are preparing your food. So, some of the basics of food safety, of course, is washing your hands before handling food. And very importantly, you are going to make sure that any sort of raw food, especially meats, is kept separate from any cooked food, because raw food, the bacteria, the harmful bacteria in chicken, for example, if it gets into the cooked food, it can grow and cause foodborne diseases like the diarrhea and vomiting and so on. Sometimes people get after they eat contaminated food. Another very, very important thing to think about with food safety is temperature. Foods that need to be kept cold are kept cold. And then when you're cooking, that it gets to the proper temperature. And after it's cooked, that it does not sit out for hours and hours in room temperature. I would say it can be overwhelming. It can be very overwhelming to think like big picture, like, oh no, I'm eating all wrong and I'm going to get sick. And, my grandma was sick and had diabetes and it didn't turn out for her well. And then you just don't end up doing anything. So just kind of pick one thing, right? And say, all right, you know what? I drink a Coke every day. I'm going to break that habit. So in the next 3 months, I'm going to get it so that instead of drinking Coke, I have some nice cold water with me, or I have some iced tea without sugar with me. I'm going to drink that instead. And then by the end of the 3 months, you've taken out something from your diet that was really harming you. Or, for example, I'm going to make sure that the cooking oil I use has healthy fats in it instead of the harmful fats, the trans fats. Just try one thing, because these little things over time, you can build them up. And then before you know it, you have a much healthier diet overall and you're feeling better and, you're doing better long term as you get older. And the same for your children, because you're creating a healthier environment in your house for your children.
Kathleen, thank you.
All right,
Carolina.
happy to help.
And that brings us to the end of the second chapter on personal and family health. Kathleen has shared invaluable insights on how nutrition shapes our well-being and that of our loved ones. Remember, what we eat doesn't just fill us, it fuels us, strengthens us, and keeps us in balance. Our palate is adaptable. Small, intentional changes can lead to lasting benefits. Savor each bite, eat mindfully, and establish regular meal times. Nourishment isn't just about quelling hunger, it's about fueling our bodies with purpose and care. And to close on a note of timeless wisdom, let's reflect on the words of the great ancient Greek physician, Hippocrates. Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food. Thank you to each and every one of you who is listening. Infinite thanks for your time. Infinite thanks for your attention. And see you in the next chapter, where we will continue to cultivate gender equality.